Hello, welcome to Smiley's. Tonight we are discussing and summarizing Chapter 3 of Fall of Light with alcohol as a bonus. My co-host currently drinking.
Yeah.
What are you drinking, Laura, actually? What would that be?
Oh, it's a classic Indian dark rum called Old Monk, which is like the best rum I've been told. But this is the only rum I've had with Pepsi. So
Right. Yeah. I have good old-fashioned beer,
beer as usual.
lager. And yeah, so we might get a bit tipsy throughout the episode. Just which might be TOS. Who knows? But until we actually get pulled out because of room service, let's get to it. So I believe it's Mora's summary this time around. So Mora, when you're ready, feel free to take us away.
Chapter 3, Fall of Light. So once again, spoilers up to Chapter 3 of Fall of Light. All the rest of it. We don't have to say.
I'll mention both Maz and Book of the Fallen and not any spoilers. So if you've not read those and for some reason you're on Chapter 3 of Fall of Light.
And yeah, please finish Forge of Darkness before listening to this.
Also that.
Yeah.
That might be important.
Yeah, but actually this chapter is sort of okay. It sort of stands alone because we have a new setting. We are at the prisons. Do you have any idea where this prison is actually on the map? I didn't really bother looking up.
So,
Did you?
I might. Hang on. Because it's mentioned that like Galar mentions that Mother Dark's best army lies in a mound like a mile south of here, a league south of here.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it's close to the Hust camps, which are somewhere to the south.
It would make sense that it is close to the Hust camp because it's after all an iron mine.
Mm-hmm.
They are mining iron. So, but yeah, there's no specific place on the map saying that these are the prisons.
Yeah, no. Not as far as I can tell.
So anyway, so now we have a few new characters. Not too much, just a few. There is Warith, the coward. He ran away. I'm just giving a small intro so that, then the story can proceed. He ran away from the Hust Legion like 9 years ago, and he's been in prison, and he's doing slave labor, which is basically mining and ore extraction. And when the scene begins, this chapter begins with the cry, "There will be justice," right? So and it's completely with Warith's POV. So when he hears it for the third time, he steps out of the mining tunnel, and we are told that he's been beating at this particular wall of the tunnel for weeks now, and it has served him well as a place where he could, with his back to the world, live out his wakeful existence. Yeah, so he seems to be like in a penance sort of mode, and at this time we don't know his crime. There is also a nice explanation about the instrument he's using. He uses an iron pick to do this extraction, and he thinks that it is domesticated, subjugated, and forged into a slayer of its wild kin. And the wild doesn't stand a chance against it. Yes, thank you. And it does not retreat from his assault, but it rather dies in buckets of rubbles. So finally he becomes curious about this justice cry because he knows that justice is a word which is written in blood, and he wants to find out who this victim is. So he comes out of the tunnel, he reaches the cold sunlight and thinks that light and air can scour his flesh and offering him almost redemption. But he quickly shuts down the feeling. He just wants to keep hating himself. Now some of the other miners are laughing and running around and they're screaming freedom. And he sees that the guards are still in place, the iron gates are still shut, and so he just feels, these guys are just being silly. Why are they shouting justice and freedom? And he knows that this is when we are told that all these guys are a bunch of murderers. And
Of course.
what have they done? Yeah, your favorite quote. What did the justice say? The judge. They have
what was it? It was
they have
abrogated the
abrogated
civil
their compact with civil society.
Yeah.
So and then he says that there is it doesn't make any sense to free these people in the name of justice. And this is when he notices that the women's camp is unguarded. Like there is no guard between the men and the women. So he picks up an abandoned shovel and goes to stand guard. This is when we get some, since he's walking, we're given some introduction. He's been there for 9 years, and his upper body is disproportionately bigger, and he's almost hunched over, except that every night he has his best friend Rebel come and tie him to the bed, so that he doesn't become too bow-legged or too hunchbacked, and it's sort of like a passive physiotherapy. And on the way, he hears this guy shouting that the kittens are awake and the way is unopposed. Something, basically, some guy notices that the women are not guarded, and Vareth just kills him with a shovel, right? And he keeps going. By this time, he's joined by his friend Rebel, who's carrying a pick, and another guy called Lister, who's carrying a shovel. Now, Rebel is this hair dude who can't control his temper. He's here because he has killed like 4 people over a perceived insult, right? And Lister is the silent one who may or may not have strangled his wife. And an unnamed person points out to Warith that, the guy who he just killed, he has some history with him, and that is why he targeted that guy and killed. And he says, he tells Rebel and Lister, don't join Warith. He's after all a coward. He just killed Merrick because, not Merrick, what's the guy? Gans.
Guns.
He,
Yeah.
he killed Gans because, he had some history with him. But then they go stand there, and Lister says that this is the day of justice and he's going to face it. And but then, even Lister has some doubts, like this is not like you to go and just start defending women and all that. Now Gans's buddies start coming closer, and Warith feels terror and shame. It's pretty written pretty well, like, his insides turn into liquid and things like that, and heat rises, which he calls shame and all that. So basically, he's ready to drop his shovel and just run for it. And Merrick, one of these buddies, approaches him, but he's, shot down by an arrow from a distance. This is important because once more we talk about arrows and shooting people from a distance in the next scene,
And dishonor.
next scene or
Yeah.
something. Yeah,
And how dishonorable it is.
it is
There's also
dishonorable.
mention of the what was it? Hang on, it was like a familiar cry, a thin moaning sound.
Oh yeah, that is next. Yeah, and then once Merrick is dead, he tries to find out like who shot the arrow. So he looks up, and there are like a dozen new soldiers on the gatehouse, and these guys are all dark skinned, and from them he starts hearing this thin moaning sound. This sound is enough to make him flinch and drop his weapon, right? Fun. So by now we know that he basically ran away from the Hust, right? So next is scene 2. Scene 2 is our friend Galar Baras with.
I love Galar in this chapter.
He's awesome, yeah. He's with Quartermaster Seltin Rigandas. I don't think this name comes up again, but I don't
Don't
know why
believe
we
so.
get this awesome name and then it never comes back. Does it come back? You can just look up. So this Quartermaster,
Apparently it does, but only just
after this chapter.
just barely a few times maybe.
Yeah, okay. So this Quartermaster is mad that the rebirth of the Hust Legion begins with a hunter's arrow. He calls it dishonorable. And, Galar sort of latches onto that word, dishonor. Basically, most of the characters in this chapter are talking about dishonor. So if you want to name this chapter, probably you should name it Dishonor. There will be dishonor or something like that. So he thinks that, after poisoning the entire Hust Legion, the stake which is pinning down him and Hunral, both of them, is the stake called dishonor. Finally, he tells the quartermaster that even honor must surrender to timing. And then he asks about these 3 heroes who chose to defend the women. And this is when, one of the rare times where we get proper exposition. Like characters explaining to other characters for their sake and for our sake. It's pretty well done, but it is basically exposition. And then he is shocked at the end that he doesn't recognize Warith, who's supposed to be from the Hust Legion, and he can only think that all he can offer these guys is redemption. What other currency beyond wild freedom for these fools who so ruin their lives? Do you notice the cadence of the words? Do you notice like how beautifully everything is written here?
There is like when the officer points out like, oh, this is Warith, and then Galar looks at him and like, oh, he's changed. And then immediately after like, no, he hasn't.
He hasn't. Yeah.
Right. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Excellent work. Yeah. So anyway, then he thinks of dishonor and redemption as enemy armies, but because it's like a civil war, they are this sort of march parallel to each other, and I don't know. It's a lot of non segue bunch of thoughts. So I don't know what to make of it. And before you can clash at a battlefield, you need to clash in your minds. And arguments of righteousness will lead us all in the end to the anguished need for redemption. Arguments, right? I don't know.
I have a quote for this too.
Yeah, please do.
I just need to find it.
From somewhere else?
Stole the Hounds. Yeah. So basically, so this is right after like Sir Domin kills like the conspirators in the city, and he thinks, by all measures, his crime was far the lesser of the two crimes of overthrowing the Andy versus killing like 5 people. So why then did his soul feel stained and damaged? Cogent reasoning could lead a man step by logical step into horror. And then Galler says that cogent reasoning step by step will lead a man into the necessity for redemption.
Oh,
which is a very interesting distinction, because if there's one word that describes Sir Domin, is that he needs it, but he doesn't want it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Thanks. Thank you.
I have a few more for later. This one just came to mind because I like Sir Domin.
So. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So then Galar Barras sends a couple of soldiers to bring these guys in, and he tells the prison overseer that he wants to use his office. And the old man says that his title and his office, they're all going to be dead to him soon, right? So, because I didn't figure this out on my first read, I'm going to spell it out. The Hust Legion is basically recruiting prisoners because they want to replace the recently dead army. And they're starting. This is like the third prison which Galar Barras has visited.
Mm-hmm.
And, soon they're just going to take over all of them. Right. And to me, it looks like, this is like a private prison or something in Kural Galen. The Hust is basically in charge because they can just take over these prisoners, right? I don't know how this thing works. Like, they are state convicted murderers, but the Hust Legion can just come and take them away. Did Silkas Ruin give them permission, or?
Yes,
I'm not sure how
the
this works.
Hust, following the Forlgan Wars, have essentially become Karkanas' army, following like Rossander's estrangement, because
yeah.
Kural Galen had the Kural Legions, which has then become Sir Rossander's Legion, right? The state army.
Yeah.
The Hust are essentially a collection of house blades and southern border swords that came in defense against the Forlgan. And then, in recognition of their deeds, an Amander recognized them as like a formal legion, and they were incorporated into Defense from the Dark, which estranged the legion proper, and then we get FOD. So, in effect, the Hust Legion is kind of like the state army, but not exactly, which is an interesting like flavor of offense, because the Sanders Legion is supposed to be the state's army, and now it's like a private army for one man, while the Hust are supposed to be the border swords defending the Hust holdings, but instead, Kural Galen's just shit realm. I'm not going to get into the details, but at least this much makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, and this overseer is that he's not happy with this. Basically, he's not happy that he has to give up his position and all that, and he fears for his life once the prisoners are freed, and he warns Galar Barras that these guys will not fight for the realm. And finally, this Galar asks the overseer, "Would you prefer your task or mine?" And the overseer just says, "I yield my office to you." Now, Wareth is taken back by these Hust soldiers, all 3 of them, and he thinks that he's going to be executed after 9 years, which doesn't make sense to him. And he says that his sword defied them. When they tried to arrest him, his sword by itself tried to kill his arresters. And that's when Lister says, "Then it's true, the weapons live." Who knew? Wareth was sent to the mines after he surrendered his weapon. And first Lister is sent in for this private interview with Galar Barras. The other 2 note that one of the Hust women has a hunter's bow. And Wareth calls it, I think, Merrick's last kiss. Why are they just calling like stabby things as kisses? I don't know. Even Haverell said something like sweet kiss of death or something like that. Like, it keeps coming up.
Pointy end of your gift, it was.
Something, yeah. Which, now that you mention it, it's sort of like an innuendo, right?
I mean, Sevek definitely wanted it to be an innuendo. I think
Yeah.
Haverall just wanted to die.
He didn't want to die. Like, yeah. So Rebel says that he has too many friends, and Warath replies that before Rebel, his only friend was a Hust sword. He then tells Rebel that, when his rage is chained, he is an honorable man. Did you notice that? He says something
Hmm.
like, yeah. And then Rebel says that his honor is not worth much. And then they're just casually talking about being raped when he's tied to the bed. And yeah, that's all. They're just friends bantering about stuff like that. Next, Rebel goes in, and then Warath notices that this woman's sword sometimes moves on its own. And he has heard the story about the Hust Legion. That and this whole prison camp, even these guys, these hardened criminals, even they don't like the way that 3,000 people were just like that poisoned.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
I
knows.
want to
Yeah,
mention about the banter, right? Because essentially,
yeah,
Warith considers himself dishonorable because he's a coward. Rebel considers his honor to be worthless.
yeah.
And so they point out that, yeah, but because of your honor and your friendship and being a good person, you helped me when you had no reason to. But, if I didn't help you, even if I did help you, if you were in a specific position, then you would be, even my temper wouldn't help you. Yeah, but then the guy who would do that would die, even if I would die as well. So there permeates a code of honor, a moral code between the prisoners, even if they don't acknowledge it. Which is interesting because the opposite is true of the Highborn, right? They acknowledge a code of honor, but pretty much all of them subvert it all the time in their schemes. This might come up again.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. Right. So, Warath knows that even after the civil war is won, will anyone try to redress these crimes? Like who is going to question Hunral after everything is done and finished? Good
Yep.
question.
Very good
And
question.
he knows that it's not going to happen because every new regime it begins with a promise for a bright future, which is nothing but a revising of a glorious past. In other words, it's something that is trying to hold on to tradition. It's going to come up again. That's why. Yeah. So there is more internal monologuing. So bear with me. He thinks that a coward thinks of regrets as. You have something to say?
About tradition, it's pretty much the next thing I want to tackle with Gadaswala.
Oh, is it?
He also tackles this because Gadaswala tackles fucking everything, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
About how portraits are weapons of tradition and how art is a weapon of tradition and how artists essentially fuel a past that never existed. So Warith tackled this here
No,
as well.
not to
Yeah.
make you like feel like uh, whatever, whatever. I'm not questioning you, but I'm
Mhm.
just saying that hasn't Kadaspala said all these things in what exactly can you? What more can you add to that? Because from what I remember, Kadaspala is like most of his dialogues were pretty amazing. Like most of his inner
Yeah.
monologues.
I mean,
Yeah. No, no, I'm not
yeah.
questioning you. I'm just saying that it's yeah, it's pretty well done. So it's good to revisit, but I'm not. I don't know. Maybe is that why you're having trouble? Is that why you're not it
Maybe
proceeding?
I don't know. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let the
Like
people
I think
speak.
even the sin bits and all, you were a bit like Steve has already said all these things in a much better way and things like that. Yeah.
I don't have anything to say.
Right. Yeah. So then he thinks that a coward thinks of regrets as lost lovers, just to be used and discarded, and maybe their regrets are pieces in a game with the prize being escape. And his definition of coward is this: someone who is a slave to living. Then Rebel comes out, and like a parting shot, he tells him that the captain has lost his mind. And then the escorting sergeant, who takes him in, he tries to be a bit snarky with Warith, and Galar Burrus stops it with, that will be enough. Now, in this scene, Galar Burrus and Warith having a chat. He says that he's looking for natural leaders to join the Hust, and he asks for Warith to help him because they're in a civil war, and the shattering of the wardens has already happened. And
Hmm.
all he needs is to replenish the Hust by order of Silka's ruin. And Warith says that their commander is Taurus. She is the one who has to command, and this is when we're told that she's still alive, which we found out in the last chapter of Forge of Darkness. But she's just drunk and locked up now. She's in no position to command. And Warath warns him that the Hust swords will twist in the hands of these murderers. Galarbara's hopes that, it's the other way around. The swords will twist these guys and make them, fight honorably or something. And Warath tells him that, the sword begged in his hand when he was trying to run away from the battlefield. But even then, he ran away because the power is ultimately with him. The sword can't really take over everything he's doing. And then by this time, Galarbaras promotes him. And the first thing he does is he calls him, "You've gone mad." Which Galar says, "Yeah, I suit these times."
I will suit the times, yeah. So
Yeah.
what I want to bring up about this is, so there is a concept mostly in ancient drama, and I guess Shakespearean drama more so, called stichomethy or stichomethia, which essentially is rapid fire dialogue, right?
Oh, what is it called?
In Greek, which is unfortunately the transliteration, since I don't think there is like an actual word in English. It's called stichomethia. I'll write it in the description.
Okay.
It basically, I don't even remember what it translates to exactly, but it's basically this, like, it's rapid fire dialogue where both like parties have one or maybe two lines each and then transfers. And it's a very good way to both display like heated arguments and to display both sides in an argument and quickly in a, like, rather than have them be orators, right? And just have Gallard say all of this and then
rather
Warwick
than
respond
making them
like, you're crazy.
P&Ds. Yeah.
Right. Though P&D also do this, but to a lesser extent. It allows the playwright, I guess, but here it's more like the poet, to display the arguments of both parties and to highlight the differences between the two in a more lively manner. So it's an interesting technique. It doesn't happen as much in modern theater because these kinds of scenes don't happen much in modern theater. But you'll find it a lot
in modern theater. So.
Yeah, I haven't either. But but you'll see this a lot in, say, Shakespeare or ancient Greek tragedies, and so on. So it's an interesting note.
I didn't know that had a name, but that's like one of my favorites. It probably not just showcases the arguments; it also showcases your writing capacity. If you can make it rapid fire and work cohesively.
And usually, the way it works, the reason it works rather, is because it often relies on antithesis. So one party says something, and then the other party will say the opposite of that. Mm-hmm. So the truth is somewhere in the middle, but they're both supporting opposite ends. So you have.
Are you going to bring up your Hegel right now?
No.
No.
God, no. None of that.
That is a trigger word, the antithesis and hypothesis and things like that. Yeah. Have you fallen out of love with Hegel? I thought you.
I've not really studied anymore. It's like I've not looked into it much more. I probably should. It is very interesting. I just haven't. What I wanted to mention is so you have, for instance, like Galar goes, "We are in a civil war," right? And then he goes, as of this moment, the only forces standing between Kirkanis and Rosana are the houseplates of the great houses. And then it begins. Then surrender. Not my call. Yeah. I need bodies. And you're desperate, I see. I doubt you see. I see well enough, sir. Go back to the commander. The soldier comes from Silka's ruin. It's not his to make. Thora's redone lies disarmed and in a drunken stupor in a locked room. Yeah. She was drunk when she spared me. I know. Why do you know? She told me, and so on and so forth. And then you're going to like that. And
it's pretty amazing, yeah.
Neither party necessarily comes out on top at the end, but you have a very good idea of who is supporting what and why by the end of the stichomethy. So I think it's a really interesting technique. It's very lively. It's very reminiscent of... Yeah?
It's very zippy, I said.
Yeah, it is. It's very reminiscent of older tragedies and stuff. And as I said, it showcases writing capacity because in order for it to be engaging, you need to write good dialogue. So
yeah. Right. So, and then finally, Galarbaras asks for a list of... Sorry, you're going to hear some splashing sounds. I'm just mixing my drink. So then Galarbaras asks for a list of names from the women's camp. And he says that he only knows them by reputation and it's not necessarily good reputation. And so Galar Bharat says at this point it makes no difference what reputation they have as long as they have some reputation. And this is when Bharat says that we are going to lose this civil war, aren't we? And what
Keep
does
that
Galar
opinion to yourself.
Bharat Lieutenant. By this time he starts calling him his, because he's joined his staff. So he says, keep your opinion to yourself. Now, the next scene, which is trippy and amazing and my favorite. I think you have a lot to say about Glyph. So, yeah, who is Glyph? Glyph is a denier who notices that the forests have become so sparse that he can see too far into it. And among the deniers, it is tradition that only the men go for hunting. Every seasonal migration of the herds, like spring and autumn, they go to these migratory paths and hunt the herds. This is tradition. But traditions die. Yeah, yeah,
This is also kind of reminiscent of the Jack from the last book, right? Rusk
right.
and the others, because they would move to the north.
They also would go hunt these herds.
They would hunt, and then they would seek out the herds, and then they would call them very specifically so that they have more herds for later. But then other types
they would hunt the weaker ones, right?
Don't respect such traditions would just hunt them to extinction, and then Glyph's hunting party doesn't find anything in this expedition because there is nothing left.
Yeah.
Because they have left
Why?
nothing.
Why? I thought you would say Kural Glen is a shit realm, so
It is, but
yeah. So yeah, and those who hold on to tradition are these guys who live in a world where nothing changes. And this is when we get the story of the people who fished the lake. It's like my favorite. I wish someone would animate just this. Yeah. You have something?
So I wanted to bring, since we're on the topic of tradition, and Cliff brings up tradition a lot. Tradition.
Yeah. You have some Seer Domin quote on tradition?
No. It's actually from Janeth, and I like Janeth a lot. Too, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, she goes, the structures of a culture do not circumvent nor excuse self-evident injustice or inequity. The status quo is not sacred, not an altar to paint in rivers of blood. Tradition and habit are not sound arguments. Which is just, it's a quote that's about relativism, moral relativism. So, how you should approach such cultures. But especially here, in regards to Coral Galeen and how they approach tradition, it's quite interesting.
Yeah. So, right, the people who fished the lake. So there was a lake, and on the shore there lived families who fished in it. They used spears, nets, traps, everything. Right? This was their way of life, and this was according to tradition. But one spring, no woman came out of the fishing village seeking mates, and a few women came to the shore looking to find mates, but they see that the camp is sort of abandoned, the nets are rotting, and even the fish spears have been left unused. And one of the young women takes a canoe and she heads to an island nearby, and there she finds all the remaining people, the survivors living there.
Are there? Hang on.
Yeah.
Are there any survivors left?
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
There are?
Yeah, she finds the people there, is what it says. Are they dead people?
Wait. Yeah, they're crow-picked and withered by the winter. They're dead.
Crow-picked. Oh, I missed that one word. I thought they were living people there. Okay.
No, because I remember they had cannibalized the children, then they died of starvation.
They ate the children and boiled the bones and things like that. Yeah. But okay, even the people have died, right? So there's no one left. And when she comes back, she looks at the lake and it's just clear water and there is no fish left. And my favorite quote, tradition is not a thing to be worshipped. Tradition is the last bastion of fools. I just love it so much. I don't know, because anything to do with tradition, anti-tradition, I just love it. So Glyph wonders if these fisherfolk knew their fate. He imagines that they had elders who would have endlessly told stories about the vast harvests in the past. Very soon we start merging into Glyph's own story, from this fishing people to the hunting people. But right now we're talking about the fishers. So there are fish in the lake, there have always been fish in the lake, and there will always be fish in the lake, right? And he imagines that they had a seer or a witch who couldn't scry the best hunting locations. And soon they kill her and they all starve because...
Wait, no. She did scry all the best hiding locations. She described all of them and there were none left. So they hunted all the fish to extinction.
Right, yeah. So there is nothing
Yeah,
left. So
yeah. And so they didn't. Well, they actually banished the witch, but the point's out.
they kill her or something. They banish her, they kill her.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the witch was cast out for her failure.
She was cast out. Oh, very good.
Yeah,
Okay. Wow, what the shit summary I've done. Okay.
no,
They
it's
all
fine.
starve because one cannot eat tradition, right? As a final effort, they all join all their nets and they sort of drag the whole lake, and that's how they end up on that island. And they don't find much. And this is pretty much what happened with Glyph and his fellow tribal men. They used to go hunting, and during the hunt they would be joined by wolves. They used to name the wolves, and then when they sat at the campfires at night, they would think of what names the wolves would have given them. And this is how tradition is built, by layering memories upon memories. And now he
Hmm.
thinks that tradition is nothing but a prison. And so even when the hunt started returning nothing, even when they started finding nothing, they had all clung to this prison. God, I feel like I'm being, are you reading the text parallelly to see if I'm
Yeah,
missing out
somewhat.
something?
I did read it. I
No,
did.
it's fine. It's a
I
good
did
thing.
read it
Yeah.
today, so I remember a few things. But yeah, because I mostly don't remember all the details in Glyph's story, and I want to see what I missed.
No, no. I just quickly summarized it and I didn't go back to it. So obviously I would have missed a few things. So feel free. And then from vague memory, we start moving to specifics now. On returning, he finds that his family camp has been slaughtered. And this is a scene we keep revisiting, from Kadaspala to Glyph to Narad and
Narad.
everyone. Yeah. So the woman who was half burned and who was crawling out of the hut, who was killed with a stabbed in the back, she was a sister. And then the child was his child, Glyph's child. Is this all very mythical to sounding to you? I don't think that it is all like very
Yeah.
realistic. Yeah, it's
Well,
a
I
very
was
trippy
gonna get to
scene.
that.
Yeah. And then from these scenes of slaughter, they had all rushed to the monastery, all the hunting men. And there they were told that bring us your children. And these guys have asked, like, what children? We don't have anyone left. And
We
that is a day.
have seen all of this
Yeah,
just
yeah.
from other POVs, which is interesting because we only saw this
Finara
from
and
external
Farrer him.
POVs.
Yeah.
From Narad, we saw it from Farrer, we saw it from I guess Triss was also there, but she doesn't really count. So on.
And that is the day Glyph takes upon himself the title, Denier. What are the things he denies?
Deny,
Denier of
denier of
life.
life, denier of truth, and denier of faith.
Wow, so amazing.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
So right, presently he's right now. You know what he's doing? He's tracking 3 Legion soldiers, 2 men and a woman, who are at a campfire. He kills 2 of them with iron-pointed arrows and shoots the third one with a flint arrow to his stomach. Not a kill shot. Something to just hurt him. And this is cruel. He makes the last one try and run. He describes that, I'm going to torture you by cutting off parts and roasting your legs and things like that. And the guy tries to run, and he dies of, basically internal bleeding. As he's dying, Glyph tells him that the arrow is traditionally meant only to be used for beasts. It's an ignoble weapon. Not dishonorable, ignoble is the word he uses. And the
Hmm?
deniers are now making new tradition by killing Legion soldiers with arrows. And these soldiers should not complain because they have been making new traditions on their own, like raping and killing and burning. And this is when he says that a sister, that one, always laughing, always teasing. I loved her more than my life. I Yeah, this was pretty heartbreaking. And then he retrieves all his arrows and he walks away. And in his head, he adds a new ending to this old story. There were a few fish which had gone upstream, and when they returned to the empty lake, they all got very angry. And one was so angry that he walked out of the water. And the lake's grieving spirit gave him limbs and lungs and eyes and everything. And he knew that the fisher folk had distant kin on the dry lands, and he's going to start casting his net wide. He calls himself Glyph, so that other fish that walked out to the land will know him. And he says, I came from the water, but now I walk the shore. Yeah. Anything you want to add there?
A lot of things.
Yeah.
So for one, it kind of helps to remember that we are seeing this from Galan's perspective, like this is Galan telling us to us. And there is an excellent quote from Dust of Dreams about Galan. Um, the Sheikh not only listened to blind Galan, then they then went and believed him.
They believed. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
believed them. So Galan effectively portrays in this chapter the bastardization of traditions and beliefs and myths and legends throughout time. Because the of
You
the
know
Book of the
what?
Fallen considered to be, yeah?
You know what? I think you just spoiled the next chapter.
Oh shit.
Yeah,
Did I?
you did. Yeah.
No, I did.
It's
Oops.
so smooth, the transition,
I'm
that you
very
forget.
sorry. But yeah, that's for next week. It's going to be coming out like a
I'm going
day
to probably
after,
mute
but
it or
we're bad.
something.
Our bad.
No, I'll just mute it. Don't worry.
But yeah. So, oops. But yeah,
Because it
let's
is
talk
a.
about the shore in general. It's very reminiscent of the Shake of the Book of the Fallen, right?
Yeah.
And it pays to recall this like Galan speaking to us, and at least one of the individuals who cultivated those myths in the Shake was Blind Galan, according to their traditions. So, in tearing down tradition as the last bastion of fools and all of that, there's a lot more to say on the Shake, which I'm gonna reserve for another time because we don't have time for this. But essentially, over time, through their oral traditions, the Shake have seemingly bastardized their own histories, legends,
Origin story. Yeah.
origin stories, which, surprise, the Dice also have done. As have the Eater, and probably the Leo-san, and arguably everyone. But more so the Shake, because Galan pretty much gave the Shake an identity in the Book of the Fallen. They were outcasts, they are mixed race, both Eater and Andy blood, at least. Probably some Leo-san blood as well. They have memories in the blood, but incomplete ones at most. Right? They're not, because we get this from both Yadan and Yan. We have, they have memories in the blood, and their memories are often incomplete, and they need both of them to actually know the full extent of the story. Glyph essentially creates such a tradition based on metaphor, and the Shake seem to have taken it so literally at the end, like through the ages.
Yeah.
Yeah?
That he walks the shore. That's it.
Yes.
That's it. Yeah, please. Let's just wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
No, I know where you're going, and even when I was doing the summary, I kept thinking that it's going to end in that scene, but it's a whole new chapter. Yeah.
Oh no! I wasn't getting to that. No,
But
no,
it's very close.
That's my summary. That's for later.
Okay.
What I'm getting at is we see in Karkanas that a lot of what we see as like set in stone origin myths for races in the Book of the Fallen are little more than metaphors and allegories by people who can't know better.
Yeah.
We see the dog runners have immortalized a witch into a goddess who dreams the world into existence, right? We see the Shake who worship the shore because there's a new tradition of slaughter. We see, who else is there? Well, everything to do with the Dice.
Yeah.
Even the Azathanai, it's questionable if they are gods or not. Obviously, this gets expanded on a lot more here.
It comes up, yeah.
Assuming the Azathanai actually created some of the races that they are like representative of, why are we not like the only people who have any semblance of mention of some sort of singular founding mother are one, humans with Kilava, but that's metaphor. We know it's metaphor. And two are the heiress with the Aerosol, who's the great mother, but then we have Volarethel claiming she's the mother of the Aerosol, and like it turtles all the way down, right?
Yeah. It's Volarethel all the way down. So we just have to disregard her.
But
yeah.
With Karkanas, you see that all of this, or at least most of it, is metaphor. And taking it so literally that you just disregard Karkanas as like an inconsistency. You're missing the point of what an oral tradition is. These aren't literal meanings. They don't really walk the shore that delineates worlds that came later, if it came at all.
Yeah.
They don't literally walk the first shore because it's not the literal first shore. It's a shore on a realm somewhere. But just like Arcanas wasn't the first city, and so on and so forth. Yeah?
No, because I've read a little bit ahead, and you have also. So these things are going to be they just keep on getting expanded on. So
yeah, there's a lot more on this later, but what I want to mention here is that just keep in mind that Galan is responsible for a lot of the shit we see in the Book of the Fallen. And now he's going back like, I wasn't being genuine, you idiots. I was joking. I was metaphor. So, yeah, that's the point I want to make ultimately. But way more on this on the next episode, which should air like a day or two after we watch this. So,
yeah, whenever you're ready. So, the next scene is Wreneck, which is a bit heartbreaking, but in the grand scheme of things, nothing much happens. So I'll just quickly go through this. He turns 11 and he thinks he looks older because of his burn scars. And his wounds are all healing, even the sword wound, which took a long time, but it is already healed. Denier has left. Now, maybe she's returned to her family. That's what he thinks. And for now, all he wants to do is track the soldiers. All the soldiers have gone east, and their village of Habara Delak is more or less abandoned. People have been leaving because there's no food. And at the alley next to the tavern, he looks for Sandalat's ex. And all he finds is Denier, who is like sort of abandoned. And she's eating rubbish and shivering in the cold and all that. And Wreneck takes her away from there. She tells him she left because Wreneck's mother did not want her. Because she's broken inside, she can't have babies, and she'll always carry the pain. What does Wreneck say? He says that he is also broken inside, but they're fine on the outside. And that is what they will give each other, the outsides. Because he loves her and he has made a spear and he's going to hunt those 3 soldiers, Telran, Farab, and Prill. And I think we both sort of hope that the 3 people whom Glyph killed are these guys, Telra, Farab, and Prill. We hope so. Then as they're leaving, some wise ass says there is no use with her, with Denier, that he will only get blood. And Wreneck tells him, you grown-ups make me ashamed. And they somehow go to the abandoned monastery because that's something he wanted to check out. And she tells him how the monks used to bring food to the village. I think this point, you should remember the way Emerald was talking about Anamander, that his kindness will be valued until it stops. So the monks
Canada,
are all...
not Emerald, by the way.
Who?
I was Kaladin. They will take your kindness as expected.
Oh, it was Kaladin, not Emerald. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Emerald doesn't speak of Anamander in such a way. I'm not going to get into it. Watch the last episode, you'll understand why I'm there.
Sorry. Yeah. Kaladin says something like that. And this is what basically happens here. She tells that the monks bring food to the villages like every once or twice a year. But some years when they don't show up because they don't have enough food, they'll be hated, like universally hated. And once they reach inside the compound, Wreneck faints and he wakes up and finds that Denier is like almost panicking because she thought that he's almost dead or something. And then she decides that she's not going to join him on his journey. She's going to return to the village and she will try to survive. She'll steal a blanket or 2 and keep herself warm and try to live. She tells him to go home and take a roundabout way because she does not want other people to see him. He says okay, and then he goes hide somewhere because he wants to wait for the dark so that he can go dig out his spear. Because he's not going home. Where is Wreneck going? He's going east. And because he never said a proper goodbye to Orphantel, he's learned from his mistake. So he says a hug goodbye to Denier and says bye. Pretty heartbreaking. I didn't want to go deep into this because it's a bit sad.
Yeah.
Do you have anything specific there?
Yeah, a handful of things. There's a very good chance the hunting party that Glyph killed, the 3 soldiers, are the very same soldiers that Wreneck is hunting, which is one interesting thing. Another is there's a good chance that Denier isn't, like, Wreneck and presumably his family are deniers, which is partly why they get so abused by Neris. I'm fairly sure Denier isn't, so this is why like she gets cast out like this, which is an interesting reversal, which is a bit sad, but also accurate.
That would make sense. Yeah.
The other thing is a lot of okay, no shit, this is going to get expanded on later, but Garganas in general get some flack for having these children that are very,
Precocious.
let's say, precocious, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it pays to notice what each one represents. You have Wreneck, you have Orphantal, you have Renar, and what else is there?
What was that young one who had wine with Orfandel? What is that name? Sukul.
Oh, Sukul, yeah. See, so I think it's interesting to see what the differences and the similarities between the children are and how they differ from adults. Because I don't believe you would ever see any adult denier or otherwise Diced going like, "You make me ashamed," unless they are in a position of power. Like Selkas would probably say something like that to Kelarash or someone below him. An Amander might say something like that to anyone, but an Amander is powerful enough to have the lenience and the ability to say such things. Wreneck is an 11-year-old denier boy who it's honestly a miracle the guy's still alive.
They tried killing him, but it didn't work, in his own words. Yeah.
So I think it pays a lot to notice the differences and the similarities between the different children in Garganas and how they weave the narrative together. So.
Nice. Yeah. But I generally don't like precocious children, but then these guys don't act like children, so it's fine. So the last scene, Glyph again. Glyph meets Narad, who is trying to bury the rotted corpses in the Denier camp. Usual Denier tradition is to just leave the body in like an unlit portion of the forest or carry it into a marsh and leave it. It's basically the bodies are disposed to keep the camp clean. But because it was already...
No, it's also something we see the Andi do later.
Much
the Andi
later.
don't generally bury their dead.
That is because, once the soul is left, there's nothing. There's nothing about the body. Yeah. Except one Teist who gets a proper crypt and all that. Oh, so sad. Don't remind me of Toll the Hounds. Yeah. So Narad says that, he killed a Legion soldier. This is when we find out that he was with Scarab and Eris, right? He has killed a Legion soldier who was teasing him or something. And that's when
Scarab... So it's probably Bursa, by the way.
Oh, the actual Bursa.
Yeah, because I remember when Steve acknowledges it, it's like one of these two has to die because they have the same name. You guys decide who it is. So I think...
Did he actually
Steve,
do that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fun. Yeah. So basically he's killed some guy and that's when he gets banished. And so he's roaming around. He's trying to wear Denier clothes, but he still carries this Legion sword and scabbard and everything. And Glyph guesses that Narad is yearning to be killed by his arrow. And then they both learn that they each have their own reasons for killing Legion soldiers. Narad even has a list of people to kill. You want to say something?
No, go on.
And then Glyph welcomes him to the camp and says, for the kindness you meant by burying my family, I will share my food with you. Then he will tell him a story. Yeah.
Okay, I do actually have something going.
Yeah.
You mentioned reasons, and Glyph goes, yes, we have reasons. You have yours, and I have mine. They wield your sword.
Quote.
They guide my arrows. They make souls leave bodies and leave bodies to lie rotting on the ground. They are the masks we'll hide behind.
I never wear him. Yeah.
Started as if he had been struck, and then he turned away. I wear no mask, he said.
Yeah.
Now, this is important for a handful of reasons. One, Narad's face is fucked. And it's quite the plot point in Forge of Darkness that he makes no effort to hide it.
Yeah.
That he wears his ugliness for all to see. And it's not a mask because it reflects who he is inside. According to my boy.
According to
my boy. And also in chapter 20 of Forge of Darkness, when Skara comes along, has the best fucking scene in the entire book.
By whose command?
Oh my god, I love Skara. Narad has quite a bit of internal monologue picturing fellow Legion soldiers with masks on their faces, which are their faces when they're dead.
Yeah.
And so
he can't picture that
this
for
mask
Scara.
imagery
Yeah.
is quite important for Narad. And when Glyph brings it up inadvertently, he shocks him because no, I don't wear a mask. I don't want to hide my ugliness. I don't want to hide who I am or what I am. I am a murderer. I embrace that. I wear that on my face.
Yeah.
And for all that I dislike Narad on my first read, and I still can't say I love him, there's a lot of more interesting things going on here. Fine.
Yeah. Like, he's not like, I don't wear a mask because I'm a murderer. He's not just a murderer. He's a lot more than that. So, yeah. Then I'm a bit buzzed. Then he'll say that, who is this? Who's this guy? Glyph says that he's going to tell him a story, and then Narad can decide if they will hunt together. And this is when he starts telling him the story about the people who fished the lake, and it is about the last fish. Narad thinks that with a name like Last Fish, it must be a sad story. And he's told, no, it's an angry story. But it still has far to go, and he doesn't know the end yet.
Okay. It is interesting to mention that the dialogue goes, the people who fished the lake. It says your story, not theirs, but of the last fish.
Yeah.
He doesn't say no, it's not my story. It is his story.
Yeah, he is the last fish. Yeah.
So, it's nice. It's
good.
neatly written.
Yeah, the thing is, with all these summaries, all we can say repeatedly is go and just read it again.
Yeah.
Right.
To be fair, yeah. I'm highlighting a few things that I pick up on this read, which is like the fourth time I've read this chapter, but yeah, go back and read it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're just doing this mostly for our sake. But if someone wants the maximum things out of the books, just read each chapter twice and keep going. Then Narad says he has never heard a fish speak, but you know what it would say if it could speak? It would probably say,
there will be justice.
There will be justice, yeah. And then Glyph meets the eyes of Narad, and then between the two men, the bond of friendship was forged. Finish it with the quote. Go on, tell me the quote before you say something. Tell me the quote.
What quote? No.
The last
what
line. Yeah. Each of us comes to the shore.
Yeah, each of us will come to the shore. Yeah. So what I wanted to bring up is, yes?
You're not finishing the quote. Come on.
Yeah,
each of us comes to the shore in our own time and in our own place. And when we're done with one life, we must begin another.
Must be in another. Each of us will come to the shore.
Don't you like it? It's an awesome quote. Yeah. Now tell me what you wanted to say.
So, right. Hang on.
A bit high? Are you a bit high?
I'm rereading the description because, like, Glyph takes his sweet ass time. He does mention the witch on the throne, which ostensibly is Byrne.
Who is Mother Dark, yeah.
Oh, yeah, good point. True enough.
What did you think?
Byrne, because, she's a witch on her wood throne. But no, yeah, you're right. She
She
devours the roots of light. Yeah. What I wanted to mention is Narad, in Glyph's perspective, is identified right before he goes, there will be justice, is identified as the murderer.
Yeah. And then he says,
not his friend. He's not Narad. He's not the soldier. He is the murderer.
Yeah.
And then he goes, there will be justice. And then we are friends now. We are murderers together. We will create together a new tradition of slaughter.
Yeah.
Which is both incredibly poignant and incredibly cool.
It is cool, yeah. So chapter 3 is done. A small chapter. We took like 50 minutes, hardly.
That's the small chapter, but like 50 minutes of talking, and it's like, it's a small chapter.
See, this is Fall of Light. It's not some rom-com pulp fiction book we're reading
that
here.
It is.
It's Fall of Light. So do we wind up?
Sure. So as Maura mentioned, our main piece of advice and the main takeaway from this summary is go read the book again, because it's really good and we cannot do justice.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying our best.
We're trying.
Yeah.
And I hope our discussions in conjunction with the summaries help people understand, or at least take away a few more things from the book. But what I want to highlight mostly in these summaries is, like, there are a lot of common complaints that I have seen with regards to Garganas, and this, why? Which is part of the approach I've taken.
Is the Karkanas why, or is your answer why?
My answer is why.
Okay.
Because, like, a lot of people talk about inconsistencies, and the point is the inconsistencies are not just on purpose, They exist so that you can more critically approach the text. Like, Galan has an agenda. Galan acknowledges that he has an agenda from the get-go.
Yeah.
Kaminsod does not. Okay?
Yeah.
Galan is mentioned in the Book of the Fallen as some high and mighty, haughty, mythological figure of like some seneschal and a poet, a mage who opened a road and shaved the sheikh. And here you have some jaded old idiot who just is trying to catch his friend because he's an old man. And he acknowledges his own faults, which is something we never thought Galan would do. We know based on like the description of Sandalath, this guy seemed like the most cocky asshole ever. And to be fair, he is a pretty arrogant asshole. But
so yeah.
So beyond the fact that it's important to recall, especially in Fall of Light, as we get deeper into Fall of Light, that this is a narrator with a very overt and obvious agenda that's telling the story to you. It also helps to keep in mind that it's prose, it is a poem, it is a bardic tale, unlike the Book of the Fallen, which was supposed to be a history. This is not a history. This is filled with metaphor. It thrives on metaphor. It works on metaphor.
Yeah.
Take things in Carcanus literally at your peril.
Don't
Mora brought this up with Glyph. Don't be a myth maker. Mora brought this up with Glyph. It sounds very mythological. It sounds very mythical. And I concur. It sounds way too specific. Like this one guy is related to like from this one village who went on this one hunting trip. And he's this good with a bow and arrow, and he found this one guy who did that exact thing. It's very contrived, and obviously it's contrived because it doesn't make for a good story otherwise. Both Galan and Fisher acknowledge this.
What I was thinking was, it's the scene of Enesdia's murder, which is like a holy place for the Andy, basically. And this scene of Glyph's family being slaughtered is like a holy place for these guys. Sort of, this is where everything begins. And, it need not be the actual physical place where everything began, right? It just has to be like a nexus. It just has to be a catalyst for the rest of the events to take place. But for the sake of a story, it's much nicer to simplify everything and say, yeah, so it was his family. It was his wife and kid who was murdered. And that's when he took, he accepted his Denier identity and started doing all this. And it makes so much better sense as a story than, as fact.
Did it happen? Probably not. But
who cares? No. The point is, does it matter?
It's a fantasy book. It's not history. Relax. Suspend your disbelief a bit.
No, don't say such things. Yeah.
So.
Right.
That was all from us for this episode. We will see you next time, which should be soon, on chapter 4, which is like double the size of this chapter. Woe is me.
Yeah, I can take up a few scenes if you want,
We will work on that. And,
we'll see.
Yeah, so thank you very much for watching.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.